Hola, fourth graders. It's Miss Mangoni again, and it is Wednesday, and we are halfway through our third week of online learning, and I can't believe it's going so fast. But today we are back reading our Natural Wonders book, and we are going to be looking at Mount Everest and the Great Barrier Reef today. As always, we have a purpose for our reading, and that is summary. So I know you can see behind me on the screen where it says, well, in front of me, I don't know where it is for you. Reading for a purpose, and it's summarizing. And so I just kind of put together some notes for you today about summarizing that I think will help. I know a lot of students have trouble writing a summary, and I kind of want to talk about what a summary is, what it isn't, and why it might be a little bit difficult for us. And then I will get into the reading. I'll read both of those out loud today because I want you to be listening to some reading so that when you have your ear attentive while I'm reading, you're looking for some of the points that we're going to talk about now in order to help you come up with the summary. Okay, so let us take a look at what we have here. Nope. There we go. Goodness gracious. That was hard. Okay, so we are summarizing. Like I said, that's what we're looking for. But what is a summary? I think most of you have an idea in your head of what a summary is when your teacher says to write one, or you've written the 37th one in benchmark this year. But what I sometimes find is that summaries are too long, right? So basically, when you're asked to write a summary, I want you to think in your head that it is simply a short, see how that's capitalized, short statement of the important points of the text, right? So the main thing is that it's short and that it's the important part of what we're looking for. That seems simple enough, right? If that's the case, then why is it so hard? I hear a lot of students, and I have all the years that I've taught, say it's so hard to write a summary, or they procrastinate and take forever to start writing a summary because it just seems hard for them to grasp what they have to do. Because you're taking a really sometimes long text and you're bringing it down to something really short. And so that can be a little bit difficult. So here's some of the pitfalls that I have seen for students when they're trying to write a summary. First of all, I think it's hard because it's very different than how you're used to writing. If you think about when we ask you to write a RADS, right? We don't necessarily say it has to be short, right? When we ask for those details, we really want details. So you give us a detail, you give us proof from the text where you found those details. Give us all of that, right? But when you do a summary, that's not what we're asking. We're actually asking you to do the opposite of giving us all of these details. And another thing is, it's not your opinion at all. So when you're asked to write a summary, I'm not asking if you think that, I don't know, say a natural wonder is beautiful, right? Because that's not what you're being asked. I'm asking you to give me the information that the author has put in this text that's important for someone to know, for your reader to know, right? So again, very few details, and it has to be short, which again is very different to what you're used to doing. Another thing is that we only want the most important details. So I'm not asking you for interesting details. And I believe Mrs. Glenn talked about that last week, looking at the difference between key details and the main idea of a part of a text versus what we find interesting, right? So I know that when I was reading the different articles and books and those kinds of things about natural wonders, golly, there was so much interesting information and so many interesting facts. But I had to figure out how to boil those down to the bare necessities, right? Of what's important for the students to know as we read about natural wonders, right? So when we're reading today, we're going to be looking for, in some respects, the main idea of a section, to pull out just what's important. And we'll take a look at something like that, very particular in the text. And I think the last point on this slide is probably the one of the biggest problems: no copying. This is a huge pitfall that students fall into a lot of times, not just in writing summaries, but in writing in general, when you're asked to provide details from a text. You have to use your own words. You can use keywords from the text, but you cannot take an entire sentence or a whole portion of a sentence and just insert it into your writing, right? Because that's, well, it's what we call plagiarism, and that's not what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to figure out how to put things into your own words, right? So I think those are some of the things that the pitfalls and traps you can fall into when you're writing a summary. So how can we make it a little bit easier? Well, I want you guys to think about your hand. Right now, hold your hand up in front of you, look at it, look at what's on the screen, and try to put this in your brain, input it in your brain so that you have that when you're writing and this isn't in front of you, right? It's called the 5-finger method. So what we're looking at is the who, and this will work for fiction and nonfiction, right? So if we're talking about the who, for us right now, the who is sort of the natural wonder that we're talking about. But if we were looking at a story, who would be the characters, right? So you're looking at the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how, right? And I know you're thinking 5 fingers, and then we have 6, which is how, but that's just on your palm. That's another place. You can put that in your memory, right? And have that for yourself. And this is not something that you haven't heard before, these 5 W's and the H, right? But if you keep them in mind when you're doing your summary, it might make it a little bit easier. So like I said, I'm going to read both the Mount Everest text and the Great Barrier Reef text, and then we will use one of those to kind of follow this 5-finger method and come up with a brief summary of the important details, and not the interesting details, but the important details of one of those sections. So let's think about what our summary needs specifically. So you can see I have the who here, but I've kind of fleshed it out a little bit so that you know what it is we're looking for in this particular reading. So when I say who, like I said, we're looking at which wonder is this chapter or section about. It doesn't quite say that they're chapters, but we'll say chapter or section. Then what? What is special about this wonder, right? Because there are little things about each wonder that makes them special, right? When was it formed or discovered? That's something that we're going to need, right? Because that's important. Where is this wonder located? That's also important. Then we want to know, how was the wonder formed? Because if you think back to the other wonders that we've read about, they were formed in different ways. Like the Grand Canyon was formed by the Colorado River flowing through it, right? So that's the important piece that we would need in our summary, how it was formed. And then finally, why is it a wonder, right? Because if you remember, wonders are wonders because they astound us with their natural beauty, their size, their power. And so be looking out for which of those 3 or what other characteristics of a wonder are specific to the one that we're looking at today. Okay, so I hope that gives us a good background and something to be focused on and listening for while I read. So I will pop out of here and scoot over to our reading. Okay. You know what? Let me make this big. Okay, perfect. So before I read, always I'm looking at my text features. There's the map showing me exactly where it is, right? And so we can figure that when we're collecting our information to write our summary, we're going to say something about China and Nepal in relation to Mount Everest, right? And then we have this lovely picture over here where you can see the summit. I think this really shows you how big and how tall Mount Everest is, right? And then it's also showing you here with the caption that storms dump more snow on Mount Everest every year. there's a lot of weather that happens on this mountain. And so this is sort of giving you a picture. Okay, let me read. Mount Everest. Mount Everest, named for Welsh surveyor and geologist Sir George Everest, is the tallest mountain in the world and one of the most spectacular sights on Earth. Called Forehead in the Sky by the Nepali people, this magnificent landform in the Himalayan mountains reaches a height of 8,850 meters or 29,035 feet and lies on the border between Nepal and Tibetan China. See, that's what our map is showing. The snow-capped Himalayas might appear old, but they are actually quite young for mountains. The mountains were formed millions of years ago when two parts of Earth's crust collided. Over time, the pressure of the two parts rubbing against each other caused the ground to crumble and rise above the sea. Since Mount Everest is a young mountain, its peaks are still jagged and steep. They haven't yet been eroded and smoothed down by endless years of wind, ice, and snow. Although Mount Everest is beautiful to look at, the conditions on the mountain are very harsh. The average temperature is about negative 36 degrees Celsius and can drop to negative 60 degrees Celsius in January. That is so cold. Even in July, the warmest month, the temperature only reaches negative 19 degrees Celsius. It never gets above freezing. And as a result, the ice and snow at the top of the mountain never melt. Because of its elevation, storms can arrive unexpectedly and cause temperatures to drop quickly. The extreme conditions on Mount Everest make it difficult for animals and plants to survive. One of the only animals that can live on the mountain is the wild yak. This large animal can weigh more than 454 kilograms or 1,000 pounds and grow up to 1.8 meters or 6 feet tall. One of the reasons a yak is able to survive is because its blood can take in more oxygen than the blood of other animals. This adaptation is a lifesaver on Mount Everest, where the air contains little oxygen. The yak also has a dense undercoat of soft hair and a shaggy outer coat that help the animal stay warm. The people who originally settled in the Himalayan mountains believed that the gods made their homes in the peaks. As a result, no one tried to climb Mount Everest until British and other European explorers arrived in the early 1900s. The earliest climbers quickly learned about the harsh conditions on the mountain: freezing temperatures, powerful winds, changing weather, and rough terrain. Despite all the obstacles, experienced and inexperienced mountaineers alike continued to come to Mount Everest, hoping to be the first to make it to the top. No one was successful until 1953, when Sir Edmund Hillary, a beekeeper from New Zealand, and Tenzing Norgay, a Sherpa, from Nepal, became the first men to successfully climb the mountain. Since then, many climbers from all over the world have risked their lives to get to the top of the Forehead in the Sky. Okay, that had a lot of information in it. And I think because of that, I'm going to choose this one to walk through with you. But let's read about the Great Barrier Reef so that you guys can hear the reading. And then when you come back, you can see it and read it yourself. But that way you get a few reads, sort of like what we do when we have our benchmark text, and we're all together. So let me read this one. The Great Barrier Reef. The Great Barrier Reef, really a collection of reefs, is more than 2,300 kilometers or 1,429 miles long. It is located off the northeast coast of Australia and is full of enchanting sea creatures, from sea turtles, sea slugs, and urchins to dolphins, whales, and sharks. More than 200 species of birds and reptiles inhabit the reef system. A reef is a chain or range of rocks that lies at or near the surface of the water. The Great Barrier Reef is the largest system of coral reefs in the world. Coral reefs are found in all tropical oceans of the world, but none is as large as the Great Barrier Reef. Most established coral reefs are between 5,000 and 10,000 years old. Many experts agree that the most recent growth of the Great Barrier Reef began between 6,000 and 8,000 years ago. So that means that part of what's below that is a lot older than that, okay? At first glance, the Great Barrier Reef might look like a rock, but it's not. It's made from the outer skeletons of millions of animals called polyps, which are related to anemones and jellyfish. As the polyps die, new ones grow on top of the old skeletons. The many layers of skeletons form the limestone base of a coral reef. Other kinds of plants and animals also help make up the reef, such as algae, sponges, and shellfish. But the tiny polyp is responsible for most of this natural wonder's structure. Oh, before I move, look how pretty that is. The colors are so bright and vivid. Um, and then this shows us here that the life and death of coral polyps are responsible for the formation of coral reefs such as the Great Barrier Reef, right? So the part that we see that looks like it's alive and moving are the current polyps, but then below that are all of the skeletons of the others that came before it. So that's pretty interesting. Okay. Reefs are made from animals and they supply food and shelter for other animals. They are sensitive to temperature changes in the ocean. Thousands of species live on the reef, including 1,625 kinds of fish, more than 30 kinds of marine mammals, 50 kinds of seaweed, and 6 kinds of marine turtles. The reef is also an important breeding area for animals, including birds, sea turtles, and several endangered species, such as the humpback whale and the sea cow. As one of the most interesting and beautiful places on Earth, the reef is a popular destination for groups of scientists, scuba divers, and tourists. In 1981, it was listed as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, a department of the United Nations. Today, environmentalists are working with all of these groups to protect the reef so future generations can learn from it and enjoy its beauty. So, that is the portion of the text that you are going to work on for your summary. But I want to help you through what that looks like and sort of the thinking process. So when I first read this to do the summary, I just read it through one time just to listen to see, what stuck out to me and what was interesting and what I think I might need to put into the actual summary. Okay, so what I did is I looked at those same questions that are on your not 5 hands, 5 fingers, and I kind of went through to see where I saw some answers to those. So that's what I'm going to do now quickly so that you can get an idea of that. So I'm just going to underline the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, the how, and kind of show you how I put all of that together. And I'm going to say this now, and I will say it again later, that I did not write my first summary and it was just the way I wanted it, right? I had to write it and then I moved some things around and I took some parts out because it was too long. And then I edited it and then I had Devin look at it and she told me where I forgot a comma. So when you write, it's not just, I'm going to type into this little box and then I'm going to turn it in to my teacher, right? That's not what we're doing. But again, I will say that again to you later. Let's look at, let's start with the who. And I am going to make the who green, right? So remember when we're talking about the who, for us, we're looking at what is the wonder that we're looking at. And in this case, I want to also write who it was named after. So I'm going to underline Mount Everest. You know what? That is a large line. Let me bring that down a little. And then I'm going to underline Welsh surveyor and geologist Sir George Everest. Sorry, guys, I just can't handle that line being so big. Okay, and that's important because this particular wonder was named after someone, right? And we want to make sure we have that in our summary somewhere. So let's see, I have the who, it's Mount Everest and Welsh surveyor, George Everest. Okay, good. So let me look at the what. I'm going to make the what orange. And for our purposes, the what is it that's making this special, right? So I think one of the things that makes it special is that it's the tallest mountain in the world, right? That's a pretty big distinction. So I'm gonna make note of that. Tallest mountain in the world. Definitely. How tall is it? I'm going to put that in too. And we're going to use this measurement since that's sort of what we are used to here in America. So I have what I think makes it special, which is part of the reason it's a wonder, right? It's the tallest mountain in the world, and that's how tall it is. I think that looks good for now. Okay. Then I will move on to the when. And remember, the when of what we're looking for is when it was created, how old it is, when it was formed. And so I have some of that information here. I will make that yellow so that we can just see it. So when you guys go back and watch the video, you can kind of see how it's laid out. So the win that I have is that it is, let's see, millions of years old. Here we go. Okay, here we go. So the mountains were formed millions of years ago. One thing I want to say is right here it says the mountains. I'm going to go ahead and underline the Himalayas because Mount Everest is a part of the Himalayas and all of these mountains were formed millions of years ago. So I want to make sure that I say that too. Okay. Let's move on to the where. I will do where in blue. Yeah. And so the where is this in the world? We know that it is on the border between Nepal, and Tibet and China. So that looks good. Is there anything else that might tell us where or anything like that? Nope, I think that's good. Let's talk about how it was formed because that's important for our summary. I'm going to make how pink. Yeah. Okay, so when we're talking about how it was formed, there is a huge chunk right here that says over time, I'm going to underline it all, the pressure of the two parts rubbing against each other. Oh, wait, hold on. First, we should note that two parts of Earth's crust collided, and then those two parts rubbed against each other and caused the ground to crumble and rise above the sea. That's a lot, right? I'm going to talk to you about using some of the background knowledge that you have to come up with your own words to say that, because you talked about this actually last week. So we're going to do that. Let's see, what else? I think that might be it. And if you notice, a huge chunk of the information that we can use for our summary is here, right? That doesn't mean there isn't something elsewhere. So we're going to go ahead and look at that now. Let's talk about the why, right? So let's make Y purple. You guys know I love my purple. So what I'm looking at is some information about why it's a wonder, why people are drawn to this particular place, right? So we're going to say it's beautiful, right? But the conditions on the mountain are very harsh, right? So it never gets above freezing. And remember, I'm just writing down my ideas. I may not say all of this in my summary, but I'm just trying to get a good grasp on why it's a wonder and what else is important about it, okay? Let me go to the next page. So I want to talk about this whole section right here, okay? This section talks about how the extreme conditions make it difficult for animals and plants to survive. But then it goes on to tell us all about the yak and how it's the only one that can live there, and it tells us why it can live there and all those kinds of things. But that's not really important. That's interesting. But remember, when you're doing your summary, what you're giving someone is a short piece of what's important. And it's sort of like a teaser, right? So you want to say some of the important information that makes them want to go in and read to see what the interesting information is, right? So let me do that. I'm going to underline the important part, right? So the extreme conditions, on Mount Everest make it difficult for animals and plants to survive, okay? That's really the part that we need from there that's important. So when we do that, let's see, what else do we need to put in? I think we should talk about how no one tried to climb it, right? Let's look at that because that's important, right? Because we are going to see at the end that that's very different, right? So no one tried to climb it until these explorers came in the 1900s, right? in the early 1900s, but nobody was successful until 1953 when we have Sir Edmund Hillary. And I'm not going to underline a beekeeper from New Zealand because not exactly important to what we're going to say right now, right? And I'm going to underline Tenzing Norway. I'm not going to underline that he was a Sherpa. I almost want to say shepherd, because that's interesting, an interesting fact, not important for what we're going to write. So I have that, and it's important because that is a part of the history of Mount Everest. It's something that's important for people to know about it, and it just gives us a little bit of information that we need to have in our summary. And one thing I want to look at is it's still a wonder, right? It's been on this list for a long time, but it's still a wonder today, and still people are trying to climb it all the time. So I'm going to underline as a key detail for myself, many climbers from all over the world have risked their lives to get to the top. Okay, so that looks good to me. That gives me enough information because remember, I can't write a lot. So I'm going to take all of this and condense it down and come up with a summary, right? So let's do that. Okay, now I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to write some of the things that I just highlighted in here, okay? So my who is Mount, and I'm going to, actually, I'm going to abbreviate Mount Everest. And then I'm going to put Sir George Everest, let's say his whole proper name. Okay. This is moving a little bit slower than I'm typing, which is okay. The what is the tallest mountain in the world. I'm going to put that in. I'm going to also put that it's 29,035 feet. Okay. I like a little space right here. Okay. So the when, we're looking at when it was formed. We know that it's millions of years old. So we want to put that. Here, I also want to throw in, you know what, I'm going to save that for my where. Okay, so on my where, we know that it is in the Himalayan mountains. Oh, gosh. There we go, Himalayan mountains. We know that it is on the border. And these are all things that we underlined and highlighted from our text, okay? So it's on the border between Nepal and Tibetan China. Looking good so far, looking good. Okay, so on our how, so I'm gonna do this, right? Because I don't have a lot of space. That stands for Mount Everest, right? So Mount Everest. Now, what we underlined before said that it was created by two parts of Earth's crust colliding, and the pressure from those parts rubbing together made the ground crumble and rise above the sea. But if we think about it, that sounds exactly like something that we learned about last week. That is the movement of tectonic plates. Because remember, you learned in your vocabulary lesson that you did last Monday about what a tectonic plate was. It's part of Earth's crust, right? And then when you were reading again, or a little bit later in that, I think that same reading, you learned about how tectonic plates move, and then there could be there's an eruption, sometimes a volcano, and then last week you learned about how it causes an earthquake, right? So we know that it's tectonic plates. So I'm going to go ahead and, so I'm going to say was formed by tectonic plate movement. And you know what I've just done, boys and girls? I've taken that whole piece of text and I put it in my own words because I know what those words mean, right? So that also cut down on what I have to write in my summary, right? So I can keep it short. So try to do things like that when you're able to. So that's how I want to look at the why a little bit. And here we're going to talk about why it's a wonder. Part of it, I think, is because it's so large, right? Because we're talking about the size of it. So one thing that we want to talk about here in our why is that I'm going to put the size, which we did. I want to talk about the harsh conditions because that, oh goodness gracious, that's not how you spell harsh. Oh gosh, 1H children. Miss Mangoni can't type today. So harsh conditions are a part of it. And because of that, no animals survive. Remember, that was one of our important parts from there. And one thing we want to say is that in 1953, we definitely want this part in because remember, that's part of the history and the story of Mount Everest that makes it important, right? So in 1953, we had Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. My goodness, Norgay. Oh my gosh, almost choked there. Successfully climbed Mount Everest. Okay. And I want to say people still, oh my gosh, try to climb. Okay. So now, boys and girls, I'm going to write in for you what I came up with for my final summary, right? But I would expect if I were turning this into my teacher that they would take it and they would look at it and they might have suggestions and corrections for me. But following what we've outlined here, looking at our 5-finger summary and taking that key information out and just kind of condensing a little bit, I'm going to show you what I came up with, and it's 5 sentences. So I have taken, these 6 pieces here, and I kind of put a couple of them together, like the when and the where, right? So it's sort of like 5, and I've come up with 5 sentences for my summary, which is a perfect amount, right? Because it's nice and short. And remember, we had a lot of information there, but not all of it was important, so we won't put all of it in, okay? So I'm going to start writing here. And when you first get here, boys and girls, this is a pet peeve of mine, when kids do not indent. Always indent your work, right? We've been learning about indenting forever. So first thing I'm going to do is hit the tab button so that I'm over because I am writing a paragraph now, right? And so we want it to look like a good paragraph. So I'm going to say Mount Everest, and I'm going to type it out here, named for, and where was he from again? Welsh geologist. Excuse me, boys and girls. I'm sorry, I'm choking a little bit today. Sir George Everest. And look, I didn't capitalize his name, so make sure you go back and do all of those kinds of things. Is the tallest mountain in the world, is what I want to say. I'm going to put a couple of pieces of information together here. Tallest mountain in the world at, I'm going to say over 29,000 feet, right? So I'm not doing the exact measurement of it. So there's my first sentence down already. Okay, I'm going to say one thing that I didn't highlight for you up there, but I thought was important is that it also has another name, right? So it's important to put that out there. So I'm going to say also called the forehead in the sky, which is very interesting, right? But also part of the history of the mountain and how it was named. So we want to put that in. Mount Everest is part of the Himalayan mountains, and can be found. So instead of saying lies, I'm saying it can be found on the border between Nepal and Tibet and China. That I kind of just have to say because that is where it is, right? I can't change that part of it, right? So, oh, I forgot my capital there. So let's do that. Second sentence down, right? Not hard. Mount Everest was created millions of years ago. So I'm going to say my when now. Years ago. By the movement of tectonic plates, right? Remember, because we said we have that knowledge in our head. So we can say that. Plates under the sea. Oh, not plates, plates. You know what? I want to point out something to you, boys and girls. I'll just leave that red squiggly line there while I finish. Okay, third sentence down, right? So now I'm going to move on to the next part of our finger, and I'm going to talk about in 1953 how Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Tenzing Norgay is his name, were the first to climb Mount Everest successfully. You know what? I think I'm going to change that. When I read the story, it said that they climbed it successfully, right? So I want to try to put that in my own words to convey what that looked like. So I'm going to say that they were the first to conquer. You think that works? I think so. Conquer what? The harsh conditions. Yeah, that's good. Conquer the harsh conditions. And then I'm going to talk about climbing it successfully. Okay, let me read that sentence. In 1953, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay were the first to climb. No, I don't want that there. I want to say to conquer the harsh conditions and climb Mount Everest successfully. That's good. That's good. That's 4 sentences, boys and girls. I'm going to do one more sentence and then I'm going to wrap it up. And then my summary is done because I will have given you and my reader the key parts that they need to know. Okay. So I'm going to take the part where we talked about the harsh conditions. I'm going to do that. I'm going to bring that in again as I finish it out. And I'm looking at how it's so harsh, plants and animals can't really survive, but even still, people try to come and do this, right? And that's an important part of the draw of this wonder, okay? So I'm going to say, despite conditions being so harsh that many plants and animals cannot survive, many continue to try to climb this natural wonder. And there you have it, boys and girls. My summary, 5 sentences, focusing on the 5, kind of 6 important pieces that we need. I'm looking at this right now, and I have this squiggly line right here. Boys and girls, that means something's wrong. So you have an opportunity on the computer to check and see what it is. And see right here, it says, did you mean millions? I did mean millions. It should have the 2 L's in it, right? So I'm going to do that. So part of writing is proofreading and editing your work, right? So make sure you go back and do that. I'm going to read this again, make sure it's what I want it to be before I turn it in, right? So I go back and I read it and make sure it's good, okay? So let's get to what it is you guys need to do. And I hope that this kind of helps you take a big subject of summarizing that's sometimes daunting and hard for many students, and makes it more accessible and maybe hopefully easier for you to do. Okay, so let's look at what your assignment is. You will reread the Great Barrier Reef section. So I want you to pause the video. You know what? I'm going to make this big so that we can see it. There you go. You're going to reread the Great Barrier Reef section. And so part of the reason I read it to you is so that I didn't have to try to copy it and paste it in for you and it'd be a little too small. What you can do is pause the video to see it again, to read it on your own. That's what you should do. Then I want you to take some notes for key details. Think about it the way I did. Write out your hand, draw your hand if you want, and then write out the 5-6 pieces that you're supposed to have. And then use that 5-finger method, the who, what, where, when, why, and how, to then type your answers into the blank Great Barrier Reef slide that you'll find on your assignment. Then I want you to write your summary. And then I say make sure you type it into the blank summary slide provided, because I would really love it, boys and girls, if you could just write it by hand first and look at it, see how it sounds to you, maybe have a parent listen or a sibling, someone, if you have someone that can do that for you, and say it, just read it out loud to yourselves to see how it sounds, right? And make sure you check your grammar, your spelling, and your punctuation, and do your best work. I know your teachers are looking forward to getting some good work from you guys, and I know that you're all capable of doing that. So I expect to hear good reports about your summaries, boys and girls, and I will see you on Friday. Bye.